Welcome to Money Secrets with Bill and Mike.
I'm Bill Alexander.
And I'm Mike Tove. Bill, what are we, we're going to talk about trusts today because you know why? Because I trust that you know about trusts. How's that?
Well, absolutely. Well, as you know, I'm an attorney. I've been practicing law for 40 years at W.G. Alexander & Associates. We're a law firm in Raleigh, North Carolina that focuses on estate planning, which has a lot of tax planning with it, along with elder law and asset protection planning. A good part of that is trust,
yes.
But I know you deal in...
Well, yeah, but I'm the financial side of things. I have an insurance and financial services agency called AIN Services, as you know. But when I get clients come to me and they need the legal documentation that makes the other pieces of the financial planning work, that's when I send them to you. In fact, I'm always accompanying them because I feel that it's important for the financial side of things to know what the legal side of things is doing.
Well, and let's talk about trust. The trust that most people think about, and what in many states is actually something that a lot of folks have, is called a revocable living trust. And so we really need to talk about that first, and then we can talk about more sophisticated trust,
absolutely.
Irrevocable
yes.
trust.
So we'll be right back. And we're back. So Bill, you were going to talk about revocable trusts.
Well, trust can be used by anyone. Not everyone has to have them. There are certain states, such as California, New York, Florida. Those states, almost everybody, even with a very modest estate, has a trust primarily to avoid probate. And that is typically a revocable trust. Now, what's a trust? Bottom line, a trust is real simple. It's just a contract. However, it's a little different of a contract in that you have three parties to it. You have the creator of the trust, sometimes called a grantor, trustor, settlor, sometimes a trust maker. Then
try saying that all three times real fast.
Then you have the creator of the trust appoints someone to manage the trust, and that's called a trustee. And every trust has beneficiaries. And what's interesting in a revocable trust is the fact that typically the person who creates the trust appoints themselves as the trustee and makes themselves the beneficiary. So I can be the trust maker, the trustee, and the beneficiary of my own trust. Now that seems a little far-fetched, but the bottom line is that you actually accommodate by moving your assets to yourself as trustee, which is a fiduciary role. It's one that you can change at any time. So revocable trusts are just that. They're revocable. You can amend them at any time. You can revoke it at any time. You can put as much property as you want to in at any time, take it out. And as a result of that, the Internal Revenue Service and your state departments of revenue just totally ignore these trusts. You don't get a tax ID number for them. You use your Social Security number. There's a lot of good things about them that go way beyond just probate avoidance.
Well, you said something that probably went by everybody really quick, so I want to back up to it because I see this a lot, and I know you do too. You said assets in the trust. And how many times do you see somebody that goes out and spends good hard money to have a trust created, but then the trust actually owns nothing?
Absolutely. In fact, there are lots of trusts that are created that don't work at all.
Right.
And for a trust to work, you actually have to allocate your property to the trustee of the trust. One of the things that's sort of hard to get used to is people talk about trust like they're a bucket or a wheelbarrow. You can throw all of your property into the trust, when actually what you're doing is simply transferring it to the trustee. A trust is not an entity like a limited liability company or a corporation. it's just a piece of paper. It's a contract that you're creating with yourself, for yourself and your family. So it's important for folks to understand that, but in my law office, I will never create a trust unless the clients understand that we're going to be moving their property out of their own name into their name as a trustee under that contract.
Well, one of the things that I use, and you can jump in if this is not quite right, but one of the analogies that I like to use to help clients understand this is I talk about how a trust in a way sort of functions as if you had a safe in your house and you've got all this expensive jewelry, and you can put the jewelry in the safe, you can take it out. But if you put it in the safe and you close the door, it's safe. Nobody, the burglar breaks in, he can't take it. But if you've got the safe, I don't care how good that safe is, if the jewelry's sitting on the counter, oh well, the safe didn't work because nothing was in it. The trust can't work if it doesn't have assets.
Well, it's a good analogy, but I think it's really important that we bust a myth as it relates to asset protection. So many folks think that when you create a revocable trust that it's asset protected, that your creditors can't reach you.
No.
And of course, you can create a revocable trust that becomes irrevocable with asset protection for your spouse and your children, but you have to die first.
Right, and yeah, and so yes, but so we're still talking about revocable trusts, and I have a revocable trust, and
so do I.
And the key, you know, it's amazing because I hear all people say, oh, they're expensive, they're this and they're that, and it's like, they don't, you know, you set it up, but other than that,
well, typically creating a good trust will cost more than just what you would call typical will-based planning. However, the cost of a trust will save you many thousands of dollars later on.
And headaches.
Because, number one, a revocable trust will avoid probate. And in most states, probate can be several thousands, if not much more, just in court costs. And then you have higher professional fees. The attorneys, as well as the CPAs, charge far more by having to deal with probate, dealing with the court, than with a trust. Mm-hmm. And so a trust-based plan is private. It doesn't go through the court system, and it is a much more effective way, particularly if you have an unusual distribution that you want for your family, or if you have a situation where you want to protect your family. There's
but
just
is
so
it
many
not
easy
also
ways.
Correct, and this is my understanding, is that a trust gives the opportunity to control distribution of assets more than just simply a will?
No question about it. It does. In fact, you can control the income as well as the assets, not only during your lifetime, but for your spouse and your children. So for those folks who love control, trusts are wonderful planning opportunities.
So when we come back, I want to explore that a little bit more, because in my practice, I think one of the big concerns is something that I simply call equitable estate settlement, is that you have to, people want to be fair to two kids, but assets can't just always be divided fairly. So let's come back in a few and we'll cover that. And we're back. So right before the break, I was talking about equitable estate settlement. Mm-hmm. And the idea is that you've got, well, simplistically, you've got one house, you've got two kids. One of the kids wants to live in the house forever, the other wants to burn it to the ground and then bulldoze the ashes into oblivion, right? And how do you do that? And so
every family has a different solution,
sure.
but the bottom line is, with a trust, you can have a different solution for your spouse as well as your children. And that's, you know, will-based planning typically is, all right, let's give it to everybody outright upon our death, and they get what they get, and then they're responsible. But with trust-based planning, you can put in a remarriage plan for your spouse because oftentimes spouses do remarry, and that can have very negative impacts on your children. So there are a lot of families that like remarriage planning and trust. You can also put in an asset protection plan for your children, and I don't know about you, but my kids are very different from each other.
Oh, yeah.
One's a spender, one's a saver. Different personalities. Sometimes children need a different kind of trust. They might receive the same amount of estate settlement, if you will, but you give it to them in a different way.
Right.
Because sometimes you need to protect children. But also, one of the main reasons that folks like to use trust is for the asset protection they can give not only to their spouse, but to their children. So many folks are worried about their children's marriages, and you can package their inheritance in a way that the children can control, but your child's spouse can't get into that trust.
Well, I have
and
to
if there's
tell
a
you,
divorce,
yeah,
then that isn't part of the divorce
I
settlement.
want to share with you a story. Now, I love this story. I go over to this fellow's house, and we sit down, we're at his kitchen table, and he goes, Mike, he says, I'm so glad you're here, which always scares me a little bit, because I always know the other shoe is about to drop. And he says, my mom passed away last year, and I'm sorry, and he says, and I'm the sole heir of the estate, and the bank won't give me the money. And I do a quick double take, and I'm going, what are you talking about? I said, is it through probate? He goes, yeah, it's through probate. And I said, what do you mean the bank won't give you the money? And he says, well, I keep asking and they won't do it. And I was going, this doesn't sound right to me at all. I said, is there any document that backs this up? I mean, is the bank following any kind of a document of some sort? And he goes, no, there's nothing written. Yeah, and I did one of those, and I probe a little bit more, and I said, there has to be a legal document. Do you remember seeing anything? He goes, well, yeah, it's in the back bedroom. So it doesn't exist, but it's in the back bedroom. So he goes and he gets it, and he brings it out, and it was a trust. It was a grantor type of a trust, and here is what it said. It said he doesn't get the money. The bank gets to hold the money for him. They get to invest it in some way that's going to be safe, and he gets the proceeds from it. And then when he dies, the corpus goes to a niece.
Oh.
And what did the bank do? They followed it to the letter. They had the money in a money market account, and he was getting the interest.
Oh, that's terrible.
So he said, well, yeah, but, so he said, that's terrible. He says, how do I change it? And I said, the only person that can change is the person who created it. And he looks at me and he goes, well, dummy, that was my mom. Didn't you get it? She was dead. And I go, do you know a good medium? Because we're going to have to bring her back, probably in front of the judge.
Well,
and, I mean...
That, from my perspective, it's a funny story, but at the same time, that's not what trusts are about, unfortunately.
No.
And of course, in most families...
But that was an irrevocable trust.
I understand, but you can leave, even when you start with a revocable trust, it becomes irrevocable at your death for your spouse and your children. And you can even have a trust that goes on for your grandchildren. In fact, in North Carolina and many states, there's what's called a rule against perpetuities but in North Carolina, we don't have a rule against perpetuities, so we can do what's called a dynasty trust, a trust that can last forever, as long as there's plenty of money in it. And so, and there's, of course, as you know, ways to create. But the bottom line is that you don't have to have a bank as trustee or a trust company. You can have your family members as trustees, and it's really important for folks to understand that you don't have to have a formality of a bank trust company or the expense of that. Trust can be very inexpensive. And in fact, the only real expense for an irrevocable trust for a child is there's an irrevocable tax return, irrevocable trust tax return that's required each year. But anybody who has an LLC or a corporation or a trust understands that that's a very inexpensive way of having asset protection for many, many years.
Well, I think the point of the story was not so much for his benefit, because keep in mind that this was his mom's money, and she knew that this kid was irresponsible. And so she created this document for that. And I think that that's the key, is that, and we've had clients that we've worked with together that are in the same situation where you need to control distribution. And so this is where these trusts have this irrevocable component. But I think that people don't appreciate that there really is a difference between these.
Oh yeah. In fact, I've seen so many trusts that have been created over the years that really were almost worthless pieces of paper. There is a difference. And so these fly-by-night trust companies really give you something that's hardly worth having. But you can package a trust with really good planning that does significant, it really accomplishes your goals in a way that you need for your family. For the outcomes that you're actually seeking. Sometimes it's about leaving a legacy, and sometimes it's just about protecting your spouse or your children.
Yeah, and so we'll come back in a minute and kind of start to talk a little bit. I want to get in a little bit more about some of the nuances of irrevocable trusts, because they're not all quite that simple, and there are certain legal and tax implications that if they're not done correct. So we'll be right back. And we're back. So, Bill, we talked earlier about revocable trusts. Now let's talk about irrevocable. Can we get into a little bit about what the differences really are?
Well, certainly. With an irrevocable trust, you can create an irrevocable trust during your lifetime, and you're very familiar with what we call ILITs, or irrevocable life insurance trusts. That's a trust that's created where you can have the ownership of your life insurance policy held by the trustee of the trust. It's a way of getting the ownership out of your taxable estate, which is really important for a lot of folks, and less important today with the exemption being as high as it is. But when you create an irrevocable trust like that, funding it can be really important. So that's an area where the financial advisor and the attorney have to really understand how it works. If you have a life insurance policy, when you pay that, if you're paying for that premium and it's owned by somebody else, obviously you can't benefit by that policy because you will be dead at the time that there's a beneficiary. And so the way the Internal Revenue Code looks at it is that if you just simply pay that premium outright, which is what most people want to do, that does not fall into the gift tax exemption of that $14,000 a year. It's actually considered a taxable gift at the time. So I know I've worked with you for many years, Mike, so you're familiar with what's called a crummy letter.
A very unfortunate name.
Well, I think it's a wonderful name. But the bottom line is that the crummy letter is a technique so that you, in essence, write a check to your trustee, who will then prepare to write a check to the insurance company, but will first give notice to the children or all the beneficiaries that they can actually have this money as long as they give notice to the trustee over a period of a week or 2 or 3. And if they don't request their money, then the trustee can pay for the insurance premium. And that makes what's called a future interest gift, a present interest gift that qualifies for the $14,000 per year exemption.
And just to back up for a second, I like to explain to folks that when we talk about crummy letters, it doesn't mean crummy isn't lousy. It was the guy's name. It was the name of the plaintiff in the Supreme Court.
Mr. Crummy versus I can't remember which state it was.
I don't remember it was.
Yes. But that's just a fabulous name for a technique that's been used for many years. And of course, there are a lot of other reasons why people use irrevocable trust. And in fact, even in a life insurance trust, you can put lots of other assets into that trust as well. But asset protection is one of the biggest reasons that people use irrevocable trust. In North Carolina, you can create an irrevocable trust for your spouse that will give your spouse asset protection, but you can't create one for yourself. However, there are other states, such as Tennessee, Nevada, Arizona, And there are other states where you can actually create a trust for yourself.
So Bill, what's our money secret on this?
Well, when it comes to trust, it's really important for folks, if they're going to do a trust, and it can save a lot of time and money for folks, is to make sure it accomplishes your goals. That it's not just to avoid probate, but it's also to do a lot of other things that accomplishes your goals.
Yeah.
And of course, there's a second part to that too, and that is if you're going to create a trust, you better put your property into that
right.
trust.
And I see so many times, and I know you have, where trusts get made and not funded, and that's the operative key. And the attorneys will tell you you got to fund it, but then what do people?
Well,
they don't know what that means. They don't know how to do it.
If you don't help folks to get their property into their trust when they create it, they'll forget about it
Exactly.
in a matter of months. So it's important to do it right, just like every other topic we talk about.
It seems to be our common secret, though, isn't it? So anyway, well, I'm Mike Tove. I own AIN Services. We're a financial planning firm. We do insurance. We do investments. Our website is www.ain-services.com, and we can be reached at 800-363-2296.
And I'm Bill Alexander with W.G. Alexander & Associates. We're a law firm that focuses on estate planning, elder care, and asset protection planning. Also, I have a radio show on Saturday mornings at 11 o'clock, and I would invite you to listen on WPTF AM 680 for Asset Protection Today.
Thanks for watching.